Thank you for being here. This is a workshop on bridging the gap ethical fundraising for youth programs. And it's something that actually Gavin and D-Hop and I started planning for last year, actually. And when the conference was canceled last year, we kind of put a pin in it. But as this year got underway, realized that the topic was even more important than ever, and just so grateful to D-Hop and Gavin for agreeing to be part of this conversation, and to Elvis as well for joining. And really the background for this is, as you may have read in the session description, that we all want to empower young people to share their stories with potential funders and to represent their lived experience to our funding partners in ways that that give them agency, and yet sometimes we see that there's a tension, and that sometimes our clubhouses may feel like they're on display for funders, or that we are being asked to represent our communities in ways that are, and our young people in ways that kind of speak to, the sort of savior mentality of a funder who, gee, everything's so bad there, and we're going to come in and fix it or make it better. And it's easy to kind of play into those kinds of dynamics, because they're so common. And also, we were talking about this in our planning call. Sometimes you're quote unquote competing with other nonprofits who play into those kinds of stereotypes as well. So to be the first ones to say time out, we're not going to do that, can be hard. It can be hard. I mean, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? It can be harmful to young people to play into that, and it can be harmful to the organization to not play into it. So what we're hoping for this time together, this hour or 55 minutes, is really to have some authentic and honest conversation about this, about the gaps that can exist between fundraising and youth program delivery, and to understand the harm that can be caused, and in particular in racialized situations where the funding community, at least in the United States, is largely white, and the communities that we work in are largely communities of color. So there's power dynamics, there's money, there's race, there's legacy systems. So a lot to unpack there, and a lot to unravel. And our hope is, I think I can speak for D-Hop, Gavin, and Elvis to say, we don't have all of the answers here. What we're hoping is that everyone will take away at least a few concrete ideas to help promote ethical fundraising and youth leadership out of our time together. So that's what we're here for. And I'd love to invite D-Hop, Gavin, and Elvis to just briefly introduce themselves with maybe just your name, your organization, the role you play in your organization, and then a little bit about the community that you're in. And D-Hop, you're unmuted. Do you want to start and just take about a minute?
Yeah, my name is D-Hop. I'm the Director of Youth and Family Engagement at Hope Community. We're located in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And even more specifically, we're located in the Phillips neighborhood. Very diverse area. Extremely, it's actually stated as being one of the most diverse areas in Minnesota. My role inside of all of this is that the Best Buy Teen Tech Center and all of the youth programming and family engagement falls under my purview. So,
great, thanks, D-Hop. Gavin?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is. It's evening time where I am in Dublin, in Ireland. My name is Gavin Byrne. I work for an organization called Foróige, which is a national youth development organization. And I've been engaged with the Clubhouse Network since 2001 is when we soft opened, December 2001. So we're 20 years going. We're going to celebrate next year with our 21st. So I was the first Clubhouse coordinator for, I don't know, 6-7 years, I can't remember, a long time. And I'm now the senior youth officer, which means that I supervise, support, mentor staff, and I'm also involved in developing new programs and training volunteers and staff. Our community is called Blanchardstown, which is a sprawling suburb on the outskirts of Dublin. It's kind of northwest of Dublin, beyond the Phoenix Park. About 120,000 people live in Blanchardstown, and it's a very diverse community. There's some pockets of severe disadvantage, and then some pockets of severe affluence as well. So the usual difficulties of crime, unemployment, early school leaving, drugs that you find in any urban suburb is present in our community. I think that's all I want to say at the moment. That's enough.
Great. Thanks, Gavin. And Elvis.
Hi, y'all. My name is Elvis Cabral. I'm the director of Movement City, and we're part of Lawrence Community Works, which is a nonprofit. Our clubhouse is located in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is about 30-40 minutes from Boston. It's about 80,000 people, mostly Latinos. And if you search Lawrence, you probably hear there's a lot of problems with Lawrence, but I think probably the biggest issue is a perception issue with Lawrence. But yeah, I think we've been part of the Clubhouse Network for about 6 or 7 years now. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, great.
And I have 0 answers, by the way. I just want to make that clear right off the top. I'm going to try to help a little.
Great, thank you all. And now I'm going to share my screen, but as I do, if everyone could put in the chat, what brought you to this session? What is the reason you're here? And folks can go ahead and chat around that. What called you to this topic around ethical fundraising, or the description. And while we do that, I'm going to share my screen and just pull up something that I'm going to invite us all to consider. Are those things coming up in the chat? I'm not sure I'm seeing them. Yeah? Okay, great. All right, well, on this slide are what we're calling touchstones for our conversation over the next 15 minutes. I'm going to invite D-Hop, Gavin, and Elvis to share a little bit about the experience from their individual organizations. But then we're going to go into breakout rooms and have some conversations amongst ourselves, again, with the hope of really coming up with some ideas for how we can break out of some of the patterns that exist wherever possible, and what we can do to create more authentic and positive youth leadership experiences in fundraising and partnership development. But as we have these conversations, I think the more authentic we can be ourselves, the more ethical we can be ourselves, the more candid and honest we can be, the better. And so these are borrowed from another organization that the Clubhouse Network has been working with. So it didn't come up with them ourselves, but You know, one of the ones I really love on here is when the going gets rough, turn to wonder. You know, to really step back and reflect on, you know, why something is coming from where it's coming from, or why a perspective is coming from where it's coming from. But I think they all might apply here, and would love to just hear from anyone if you'd like to unmute, if there's anything here that causes you to wonder, or that gives you pause, or makes you question these agreements before we go any further. Anyone? Okay, I'll take silence as consent around these then, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite I guess D-Hop, if you wouldn't mind going first, to just share a little bit about what brought you to this topic, and to the work around ethical fundraising.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, what resonated with me when we started even talking about, you know, ethical, unethical fundraising was just the experiences that I've had as being part of an organization, and the understanding that we try to bring to fundraising, and also how our young people interact inside of that. You had said something earlier about offering up, or kids being put on display, and different things like that. So one of the areas that I'm going to be talking about is understanding the harm that can be done in situations where youth feel exploited throughout inside of some of this process, and just briefly kind of speak to that. Just as an organization overall, we part of our philosophy is that we do not chase money, right? Is that the funding that we tend to go after, to make sure that it aligns with the mission and the values of the organization, and that the funding should allow us to do the work that we're asking for in those particular proposals and requests. So I think that the more you're connected to that, it definitely can help you in deciding what you're going to go after. You have more of an upfront understanding of what is being asked of you and your organization. We talk to kids all the time about why and how we engage with funders, right? We talk to them about understanding the value of what funders do bring to the table, in terms of allowing us to do the program, allowing us to get the materials and supplies that we need to do the type of engagement that youth are saying that is, particularly I'm talking about youth program, that our youth are needing to do the things they need, allows them to get these different type of touch points and these different type of opportunities. However, inside of that, and we also talk to them about, it allows us to be culturally relevant as well in some of the offerings that we have. That's extremely important to us, to make sure that what we're doing, our kids can see themselves inside of that. But also inside of that, it can get weird and funny when kids are part of things and they're starting to see maybe the funder take whatever they did and they use it in a more bigger way, or it just leads to more things than what was initially stated at the beginning. And sometimes kids can start feeling exploited around that. They start looking into, well, what am I actually getting out of this as well? Here's where my stories are being shared. Here's where my narratives, and here's where they may start having that feeling of, I'm not really getting anything out of that. A lot of times young people do appreciate the opportunities that are put forth to them, and they understand in a way that it can help them. But also we're dealing with youth who are extremely knowledgeable, who are able to see and ascertain certain things. They're able to see funders are bringing in money into their different coffers, but then they're still in the same situation that they're in. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the term poverty pimping and different things like that. Sometimes folks in our community and our young people can feel that they're being exploited in that type of a way. Here's where they're engaging, here's where they're doing these different things, but they're not seeing any type of, and it's definitely not just a monetary thing. We try to talk to funders to make sure that are we able to connect our kids to a deeper engagement with something? Are we able to make sure that it goes past just sort of this touch point? A lot of times our kids just get these touch points, but they're not getting any true certifications, or they're not getting any true connectedness to what they bring to the table to make them be able to see and to take these things a little further than just these initial contact points. Sometimes when kids' likenesses are being used in different type of campaigns and things of that nature, you also have this other outside influence to where you have family members who will start saying things like, wow, that's really great what you did. We really support it. But here's where we could see someone else is growing off of that, or making some type of profit off of that, or they're able to use that to tell their narrative to where it helps feed their situation, but it does nothing really for the young person. And then the young person then starts coming to us as being those connectors and the persons who have the relationship with them. And then that could kind of turn the situation kind of funny a little bit in terms of how they feel they want to engage and so on and so forth. Again, I think funders should start thinking about these concepts of how do we connect with the frontline people first before we start putting out what we want you to do. And another thing we're seeing is a lot of funders are turning into actual program people, to where what they're bringing to you is an already laid out plan of something that they want to implement. And sometimes kids can start feeling like, well, they're just being part of a task. Here's where somebody has decided what's going to happen, and here's where I'm being tasked with just to do that. We like situations where if we are going to be involved in that, is that there's conversations with the people from the front, from the beginning. There is not a one-size-fits-all model. All of us have different community needs. All of our youth have different needs. There can be some foundational things that is brought to the table, but I think that the more effective work is being done when it's led by the folks on the ground who have those relationships with those youth, who understand what the youth needs are, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I would just, challenge funders to start thinking more around those type of areas. So
I see lots of comments in the chat and heads nodding, T-Hop, and challenge funders and challenge ourselves to engage in those conversations with funders, right? I think some of it also is on us to kind of help with that education.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely, yeah. I did see where a lot of people was resonating with that, and a lot of the things I'm going to be reading some of those notes, but clearly, these programs are aimed and is in Black and Brown communities, and I just think that what folks are saying is absolutely on point and true.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Angel, I saw your question. Yes, this is being recorded. So I also want people to know that. So if you'd like to share it with others, please feel free. And with that, I'm going to ask Gavin to share a few thoughts for us from his perspective in Ireland. Then I'll turn it to Elvis, and then we'll break into small groups.
Okay, Gail, just stop me if I'm going on, will you, please?
I will. We're trying to do 5 minutes each, so yeah, it's
great.
tough because
Okay.
there's a lot to say on the top. I
Deep
will
breath.
be brutal if you ask me to.
Okay, so I don't know in the States or other parts of the world, how you are designated as an organization. Are you a charity, and is there a definition of a charity? But for us in Ireland, a charity has three purposes. It's involved in the alleviation of poverty, the provision of education, or the provision of religion, or promotion of religion. So three things. So in Ireland, it's very easy. Once you say you're a charity, people understand exactly what you're about. For us, it's around social inclusion. It's education and poverty, I guess. For us, so what does this ethical fundraising mean for us? Our funding streams in Ireland, we've got a social contract. We've got state funding from many social initiatives and social enterprises, and Foróige is a social enterprise. So we are funded, about 90% of our funding comes from the state, comes from the government. It's either through various government agencies like the Department of Children and Youth, or the Health Service Executive. We've got a nationalised health service in Ireland. Or funding comes from community development funds. And it's the function of government to fund the likes of us. It's written in law. So we're maybe slightly in a different position than in the States. But then we do also need to have our funding coming from philanthropy and that kind of thing. If I have time, I'll talk about that. But the first thing I wanted to say is, have you got a youth participation structure, youth leadership, youth participation structure in your clubhouse, in your organization? And if you don't, maybe that's the first place to start. Are your young people involved in this adventure and in this venture of fundraising? When I talk about a youth participation structure, I'm talking about a space where young people have the right to express their views and have their views taken into account and given due weight. Do young people influence the direction or the policies of the organization? So do you provide a space, a voice? Do you provide the audience and the influence? So this is not youth consultation, or this is not gathering a group of, or a clubhouse council to gather the views of the young people, and it goes nowhere. So it's really important that you have that in place, so that young people have a direct say in how you're going about your fundraising, what stories you're going to tell, and what stories will they share with funders. Often we think about what a funder might need from us. So the funder, as I say, might be part of a government strategy, or the company strategy. For example, Best Buy, we had Intel initially as our funders for 4 years, who funded us. They wanted to see us engaged in technology education for clearly disadvantaged or underserved young people in communities. And this is exactly what we wanted to do. That's exactly what they wanted to see as well. Have you gathered statistics from your community, the census data? What is the ethnic diversity in your community? What is the youth population? In Blanchardstown, where our clubhouse is, we've got the largest youth population in Western Europe, and it's the county with the biggest growth in youth. A third of our population are under 25. Do you have the unemployment rates, the crime rates, the drug rates? What is the proliferation of drugs in your community? Also, then, do you have a bank of information of what's good and what's working in the community? Do you have longitudinal studies on the effect of your program on young people? And I know that there's an alumni piece of work to be done for the clubhouse. So what I include in a lot of my fundraising applications or to the government agencies is the survey that we do every year with the Clubhouse Network. And that's really important. Finally, then, have you made friends with your local stakeholders who will advocate on your behalf, with the police, the pastors, the imams, the rabbis, the mall managers, the shopkeepers, the bank managers? Have you made friends with them? Do they know what you're doing, so that they would advocate in God knows where, what boardrooms or what meetings or who they're meeting in the shops, that they will talk about your program? And all of this then gives your stake in fundraising a higher plane. I think I've said enough, have I, Gail?
Oh, you're right on 5 minutes. That's
Right on the
amazing.
button.
Thank you for that. You know, I think what you were just talking about as well around engaging your community and creating those local community partnerships can also point to the strengths of the communities that we're in and the assets and resources that the communities offer. Again, coming more from a strength-based than a deficit-based perspective. Thank you, Gavin. Elvis, can you share with us the experience at Movement City?
Yeah, so I feel like I live in a weird space because I was I was reading some of the comments and trying to keep up. But I just became director recently of Movement City. Before that, I was pretty much an instructor. So now as I'm transitioning, I know some of you know that that's really hard, right? To kind of give away that being with the kids all day and then starting to become more of a desk job, learning a little bit more about funding, starting to understand how things work. I think my relationship with my nonprofit is a little bit different because of the communication, right? I think it's a lot of our funding comes from, they do development and other kinds of programs that bring money in. When it comes to the youth program, we have this communication. We're able to ask, or this is the projects that we're working on. Can we find something that kind of aligns this a little bit? Sometimes when we do have things that don't quite align, there's a conversation that we have with the youth 100% of the time. A lot of our decisions are youth-based and with youth opinions and comments and conversations going. Sometimes bringing youth to the table to talk to even to the people who are above me so they understand whether it's a positive or a negative. So for me, communication with the funders is probably the most important thing. I think honesty, not only with the funders, because again, they're gonna ask you to do certain things that you might not want to do or that don't align with the program that you're trying to run. That's why bringing the youth to the front line and showing, hey, this is the conversation we had with them. Everybody would love some extra money, but we want to make sure that we're running the programs the way the kids want it to be ran. So I know that that's something Gavin had mentioned. So, and also like the honest part is really important for me with the funders. Hey, we can't do that. Our kids wanna, so we had, for example, like wearing a mask. Our LCW, who's the parent company, wanted us to have a wearing a mask campaign, which obviously I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure that it was a conversation that the youth had and they pushed and they felt comfortable with. And after all that, it ended up being something that they wanted to push even more aggressively than the adults in the program. I read also because they don't have boots on the ground and it looks like they're jumping through hoops, and I agree 100% with that. That's something that we fight all the time because people who are doing these fundraisers, as soon as they see a large amount of money, they're gonna throw it at us and say, hey, there's money coming in, they're ready to give it to us. You have the kids for this. We've been able to talk to them, kind of deconstruct a little bit. I know there's a coding program right now that we had to deconstruct, and it was through conversation and making them understand that our population had a different kind of focus and we couldn't bring that kind of group in. So I think my point of all this is being honest with funders, being honest with the people who get the money, and also being honest with your youth and bringing them to the table to have a conversation with them and be open. And I'm pretty sure Gavin touched base on a lot of that. So that's what we try to do, just kind of keep that relationship. And I feel like the more the kids know, the more the youth members know about the kind of relationships you have with the money and the people who make this decision, the more they want to be involved and kind of sit at the tables and go to these meetings and be way more involved and have an actual opinion that comes from like having knowledge of the situation. So I'm honestly here to learn more than anything, because I feel like there's a lot of opportunities we're missing, and that we pretty much seen the same situation from like these little small different perspectives, but we're all looking at the same thing. So that's my piece.
Thank you, Elvis. Yeah, I think we're all here to learn, and that need sometimes to say, this isn't going to work for us. It's hard to do. But it's really important to know that that's something that's always an option, always available to us. Well, before we break into small groups, I just want to share one resource that actually I want to thank Heather Monty, who's the Clubhouse Network's new development director, for pointing pointing us to. It's there's kind of a new movement called community-centric fundraising that has come up around grappling with these exact issues that we've been talking about in the last half hour. And I'll share when we all come back after the breakouts, the website that you can go to read more about this movement, this community-centric fundraising movement. There are actually chapters devoted to it growing up in the United States and in several different cities. But they've published 10 principles of community-centric fundraising that are listed here, and we don't have time to go through them in detail, but this notion that fundraising, you know, must be grounded in race, equity, and social justice, and that is a perspective and a foundation that needs to be first and foremost in the work of fundraisers who are at grant giving organizations and also on the receiving side. You know, this notion of treating donors, number 6 is one of my favorites, that we treat donors as partners, and this means that we're transparent and occasionally have difficult conversations. So to all of this really, that is important. And then number 7, this notion of fostering a sense of belonging and not othering, where you know, funders come in to observe or inspect or you know, create a sense of other between themselves sometimes in the communities that their money is funding. And again, when you lay a racial perspective on top of all of this, added to money and power, it's really, you know, quite fraught. So again, I'll share these later, and you can go and read. There's something to unpack about each of these 10 on the website that I'll share. But I want to make sure that we have time together in small groups to have some conversation about this. And so I've asked Jake to divide us up into maybe 8 or 10 groups, where my invitation is to all of you to, you know, have some conversation about what we can do to create more authentic and positive youth leadership experiences in fundraising and partnership development, and break out of the dynamics of some of this that I think is resonating with so many of us from the comments in the chat. And so if you wouldn't mind identifying someone to bring back and share with the group as a whole. We won't have time when we come back to share every group, but you know, just some highlights. That would be great. And we'll take about 15 minutes in these groups to really try to have some deep conversation. Again, focus not only on the challenges and the problems, but you know, what are some of those things that we might take away from this to create more positive experiences. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I will put the question, the discussion question in the chat, so everyone has that. Oops. Try that again. And I'll ask Jake to send us off into small groups, and we'll see you all back here in about 15 minutes.
What's up?
Hi, Jake. I was in a room with Heather. Could you put me in a different room? Just so.
Sure. I gotta find where I put you in the first place.
Well, I think it was in 8, but
Yep.
you know, if it's too hard, it doesn't matter.
rudely cut
I
off in
know.
mid-flow. Anyway, they got it.
interrupted. The Zoom waits for no person.
I
Jake?
know.
It's good to see you all back. I don't know about you, the last word in my breakout room was frustrated. So maybe, hopefully that isn't so for all of you. We just have a couple minutes, but I wonder if anyone from their breakout room has anything that they'd like to share that they're really excited about, that's a theme or an idea, again, around this topic of what we can do to kind of break this paradigm a bit that we all are facing. Anybody? Just go ahead and unmute and start talking. We'll see if that works.
So I can jump in because Mark from our group actually dropped a resource in the chat for, it's not free, you have to pay for it, but it's something that you can use to search up different grants. So that was something that came up in our discussion group. I was also nominated to speak by Gavin, so I'm speaking. But basically our group talked about the ethics of the grants that we receive. And Bill brought up a really excellent point about if you receive a grant for technology and you also receive another grant for technology, the ethics behind using all of that money for technology, as opposed to maybe scooting that money over to somewhere else where it might be needed more. So just kind of the ethics of like taking money from funders and the integrity that we have as organizations to use that money in the way that it was given to us. But then we also talked about the importance of elevating youth voices and not just kind of opinions in terms of councils, but actually having youth make decisions about fundraising so that they're actually involved in the conversation and those voices are elevated. And I think my question to the group was, how do we get to a position where we kind of flip the script a little bit? Because right now it feels like a lot of the money being offered is by people that aren't necessarily having boots on the ground and doing the work. And so they're offering what they think the community needs as opposed to the community getting what it actually needs. And so there's this kind of weird shift where it feels a little bit backwards, like where the community should be putting out what it needs and then people should be stepping up to support that cause. But right now it's kind of the reverse. So those are just some of the topics that came up in our discussion group.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Cassandra. Anybody else?
Okay, I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Angel.
The Boys and Girls Club of Greater St. Louis, built by Teen Tech Center. So one of the main things that we talked about was developing a youth leadership program. So with that youth leadership program, you can kind of teach them marketing skills and stuff like that. And so that'll kind of bridge the gap between the donors and the members, because now they see this as a business aspect and not as, that who are these people? Because then the teens can explain it to their peers, as well as they can be the ones to kind of, allow to help the donors tour the space and kind of, create that community. That the youth leadership program can kind of be the youth that kind of bridge the gap between the two, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's all about, because regardless as they get older and they grow up and they go into business or just the real world, they'll realize that this is a part of, this is just a part of life. You gotta find money, you need money to, do things. And so with that, you don't want to necessarily put your feelings on the line all of the time. And you're training them to become a successful adult and letting them know that we understand your feelings, and we're not going to bring somebody, who, obviously doesn't have anything good in mind, but there's some things that we have to do. And if you understand the process, then you understand why, some things are being done. So just teaching them along the way. So
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. We have time for maybe one more. Anyone else have a share out?
If I can speak. Something we talked about in our group was just, we teach people how to treat us. So as organizations, we need to, screen these people. So if they're coming into our space, hey, welcome. These are our community agreements. This is what you're walking into. This is our space. So this is not to be disrespectful, but if anyone's tiptoeing around, it should be them coming into our space, because a lot of the times it feels like our young people are put up to be gazed at, right? So people just come into the space and they're just kind of like watching us, and it shouldn't feel that way. It should feel like something that someone said was they should be coming in and playing video games with us. They should be coming in and creating with us. They should be coming in and just wanting to be a part of it, if that's really what their intentions are, to give us resources. We appreciate it. We understand that in the line of work that we do rely a lot on donations and fundraising, but there needs to be control as far as what are you allowed to say? What words are disrespectful? Maybe you don't understand that these words are touchy, and kind of already screening them so that when they come in, they're coming in respectfully, and that they're respecting our young people, first of all, because like we were talking about, like the mother lion, right? So if someone comes into my space, all of the young people, I know they're not my children, but I feel in some way, somehow I have to protect them. And I feel like all of us feel that way. So what are we doing to protect our young people from getting their feelings hurt, from getting, disrespected? So again, it's just like screening these people before they come in and letting them know, this is our space, this is how we work, this is what you're allowed to say, this is what you're not allowed to say. And not in a way that's disrespectful, but just kind of letting them know the law of the land.
Thank you, Astrid. I think that education is so important. Yeah. Well, we have 2 minutes left, and I want to give everyone time, not to like rush to the next thing, but actually to reflect on takeaways. In the chat, I'm going to put the URL to that community-centric fundraising site that I mentioned. And, again, you can look up, there might be a chapter in your town. Maybe you want to send that link to your funders as well. I think as part of a conversation that you engage with them around this topic. And I don't know if you want to send them a recording of this workshop per se, but do feel free to share it in your organizations as well, where there are others that you think would benefit from being in dialogue with you around this topic or this set of topics. So thank you all very much. I want to thank D-Hop and Gavin and Elvis for joining me in kind of, setting this up for you and sharing their own experiences. And thank you to all of you as well. This is just the first conversation around this topic that frankly, we've ever had at an annual conference, and I'm sure it won't be the last. So thank you again, and everyone have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.